This programme is sponsored by Mousemesh. Mice get into your home via the air bricks. Mousemesh is a humane alternative to preventing mice and other unwanted guests from entering your home.
Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. On today's show I will be screening part 2 of the Richplanet 2016 speaking tour. But before that, some observations on the brainless media. Last week, yet another mass shooting incident was reported in the United States. Incredibly, before you could say Barack Obama's a puppet, the BBC had located the crime scene, travelled to the crime scene, found the identity of the alleged gunman, obtained a passport-style photograph of the alleged gunman, found how many people he had killed, found out what weapons he had used, found out who hid in the toilets, found text messages sent by the victims, and, most importantly, found out why he had done it, before any police investigation had been completed. In fact, I don't know why the United States government bothers to have a police force when it can just call the superheroes at the BBC who seemingly solve any crime free of charge in seconds. They don't even need to have a trial. Sorry, I got that wrong. There won't be a trial because the perpetrator was allegedly killed, as usual. So we get an inquest, which, if in the UK, means no jury, as in the Jed Allen case. If this event was a genuinely unexpected random attack, do you really think the BBC would be able to do all that? It's reminiscent of so many other contrived events we've seen over recent years, and I don't think I need to tell the viewers of Richplanet what the probable motives are for these kind of events. Now then, have you registered to vote in the referendum yet? Are you going to vote in or out? I laughed out loud whilst listening to Radio 4 the other day, who were reporting on the latest psychological operation intended to try and get more people to vote. They said that the computer system had crashed because too many people were registering to vote at the same time. I spat my coffee out over the computer screen. If you believe that, you believe anything. But don't worry, they said. The government have decided to extend the deadline by 1 day. Phew, I bet that story added a few % onto the turnout figures, which of course is what they need in order to justify the hapless EU and UK parliaments. Now, most people's birthday usually lasts around 1 day. The clue is in the name, birthday. But not the Queen of England. If you watch mainstream media, the Queen seems to have been having a birthday for about the last 6 months now. Not only that, she apparently has 2 separate birthdays, which by my reckoning makes her 180. How much more can the mainstream media possibly milk out of the Queen's birthday? If you don't think it's all propaganda, then please look up the word propaganda in a dictionary. On with the show and part 2 of the Richplanet 2016 speaking tour, and first a roundup of all the venues that we attended. Right, this is the start of the Richplanet 2016 tour, and I'm in Newcastle. I've driven up from South Wales and we're on the way to Edinburgh, which is the first venue. And this is Mark, my roadie. Right, Mark?
I'm Mark, Richard's roadie. Hit a bit lucky having such nice weather on the very start of the tour, so hopefully that keeps up.
So we're just travelling over the River Tyne now. We should be in Edinburgh in a couple of hours. Then Glasgow. I always find the Edinburgh audience is a bit more subdued than the Glasgow audience, a bit more studious and quiet perhaps, and the Glasgow lot occasionally shout things out in the audience, which is good. So the first venue is the Waterside Social Club in Edinburgh. We're staying in a nice little place in Glasgow. After that, back to Newcastle, the hometown, which is, they say your hometown is always the hardest crowd, and then down to Hull, Manchester, then Liverpool, Derby, Birmingham, London, Aylesbury, Weston-super-Mare, and Merthyr Tydfil. And it is very bonny today. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. We're going to go to the Glasgow venue now, but we've got a few hours to kill. What did you think of it last night, Mark?
Oh, really good gig. Very good start to the show, to the tour. I think we're going to get a bit more of a feisty crowd tonight with the Glasgow.
One of the big issues to do with Scotland over recent years was the vote for independence. A lot of people think that vote was rigged. That's possible. I don't actually think it was a vote for independence, because if you're voting for independence of the UK, then you have to vote for independence of the monarchy, of the intelligence services, of the military, of the Bank of England, and all these other institutions, which, even if Scotland had been given independence, they wouldn't have been free from any of those things. They would have been free from UK Parliament, which I believe has no power at all. It's not the power in the UK, so I don't think they were voting for independence. True independence would mean just that. So I'm looking forward to tonight. We always get a good reception from people from Glasgow. The Iron Horse, a couple of years been there, and other venues as well in Glasgow. We'll always get a good crowd. Mark's a bit of a musician, singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar player, written many songs. We'll get him to perform one perhaps at the end of the tour. Can you perform us a song at the end of the tour, Mark?
I think I could do pull something out the hat. Why not?
Pull something out of the hat? You'd give us a few options?
Possibly. I could use the guitar, mind, but you know.
We will need to find somewhere with a guitar. Right, I'm coming into Shopley Bridge, which is where I used to live. I'm going to pick Mark up, who lives in Blackhill Concert, and viewers may remember that the poet in the pub, Phil Atherton, also lives in Blackhill Concert.
Oh, welcome to Richard's Roadie's house.
Did you have a good sleep?
Not too bad. Had to unwind for an hour.
Did you?
And then well, I went to bed at 5. I mean, we got back, what, just after 3.
Yeah, so we drove back from Glasgow last night. What, 3-hour drive, and we didn't get in until 3 AM. So
pretty quick drive because it was so quiet on the motorway. But I think I finally drifted off at 5, and then I woke up at
yeah, and I
well, I think 11 o'clock, so I had about 5 hours. So
right,
on with the show.
Oh, you've been up since 11. I slept until 12:30, like, so yeah.
I think this is what time I used to get up to be honest.
So we're heading for the tune. Do you follow football at all?
Yeah. If I supported a team, I would support Newcastle.
Do you support the Toon Army?
I do, I suppose, yeah.
Give us a chant. Give us a chant.
I do know one actually.
You were just singing it.
I'm coming home, Newcastle. Never should have been away. I'm coming home. Rest in peace to the man who wrote that, good guy.
Ronnie Lambert.
That's the one. I should have sung it. Ain't no doubt it's plain to see.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Neal. We were singing that yesterday, weren't we?
That was our
what?
Kind of alarm clock.
She's lying.
If Meatloaf and Jimmy Neal were to do a duet, it would sound like this. And I would do anything for love. He's lying.
This is a big river, is it?
So what do you think about the pedestrianisation forest?
We're on the Scotswood Road, which is a famous road in Newcastle. The blading races, except that you would be going in the other direction if you were going along the Scotswood Road to see the blading races. Just arriving at the next venue number 3, Newcastle. Tyneside Irish Centre. Right, we've nearly set up at Newcastle. Got our Richplanet pop-ups in place. Check this sound. Mark is over here setting up the stall, which features Where Did the Towers Go by Dr. Judy Wood DVDs, including the new Madeline McCann film When Madeline Died ? This is where I'll be standing. My laptop. We've got about an audience of 130 coming today.
This video is at Building 7. Notice it's one piece and one piece only that has this lather pouring out of it.
And I've also got the name and address of the woman who found. I'm on my way down to Hull. I'm still in County Durham. It snowed last night, as it does in Concert. See, it's a glorious sunny day. We're going to have a slow drive down to Hull. Right, we're halfway to Hull, and it was fantastic weather when we left, but it's snowing now. Right, we've just arrived at Hull, and we're at the Inglemeyer. We're in Liverpool now. This is the Adelphi Hotel Grand venue. The van's open, Mark. It's just up there if you want to start unloading. That's the nearest I could get it to the door.
You know, got over there.
Okay. So this is where we are tonight. I'm on my own now. Mark left me in Derby. He's gone back to Newcastle, so I've got to set up myself. Hot Shots Snooker Club. I think it holds about 200. We should have about 150 coming tonight, I think. Stayed at Andrew Johnson's for a few nights, so I didn't have a talk last night, so I still feel knackered. I'm at the Swanley Richplanet talk with Dr. Nick Colostrom. A few other things just made me a bit wary of this particular event. This is probably going to be the largest one. Over 150 people coming to this one, so I've actually ordered a security guard. Yeah, there was a few people shouting out stuff at the back, but apart from that, it went really well. And I'm on my way to Aylesbury. It's 5 to 1 in the morning, and the sat-nav's brought me through London. Get to see the sights of London. I like to do the drive sometimes after the talk, and then I know that I'm at the venue first thing in the morning. They've all gone pretty well. Nick Colostrom was there tonight, and he said a few words about his new book. Aylesbury is sold out, a smaller venue than normal, only 100, but sold out nonetheless. Alison, Jennifer, Alison, Philip, it's a great song, it's just a list of women's names. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. Okay, I'm in Aylesbury now. I'm at the Railway Club in Aylesbury, hence I'm standing near the railway line. Right, I'm at Aylesbury, and we've just finished. Everyone's gone home apart from a few stragglers. Andrew Johnson is one of us.
Yeah, very straggly here.
We've got who have we got?
Neil.
Neil.
Neil Geddes-Ward. Hello.
Oh.
Menna.
Menna.
Christina.
Matthew.
Douglas.
Yes,
You've all
Douglas.
helped me pack up, for which I'm very,
Absolutely.
very grateful.
And here we are at the Railway Club.
I'm on my way to Western Super there. Made of cheese. I'm in Somerset, and last night I stayed at the Webbington Hotel. See it in the background there. I'm just arriving in Western Supermare. There it is. The Grand Atlantic. I love this place. There's the new pier, which place, the one that burnt down. The Greek mafia run this place, apparently. So I'm told. Looks a bit continental, doesn't it? Weston-super-Mare. Mediterranean town plonked on the Bristol Channel. It's great. I'm in Weston, and there's a guy called Steve who lives here, who has been great help over the years with gigs at Weston, and he lives in this flat. I've just seen him go in, actually. Right, Steve. All right, he's coming. Here he is. I've got him on camera.
Oh.
All right.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good.
Come on in.
All right. Now, just while I've got you on camera, one of Steve's claims to fame is you stood for Parliament in Weston-super-Mare.
I did.
Is that right? Yeah. Give us a reason why you did that.
Advertising.
This was all getting very bizarre. Yeah, I didn't actually say that I believe the Hawkins story. I find it persuasive. There's a difference. I'm still looking into it, but I can understand a motive if it was done. Okay, all ready to go? Yeah. Part 2, which is only an hour. It's a bit shorter than part 1. We'll have a Q&A, or people can say whatever they want to say. Right, here are the guests that I had on my last series of Richplanet. I hope I don't get accused of having an all-white male cast. One of the guests was Gary McKinnon, the computer hacker who accessed NASA computer systems, the Pentagon, and the US Navy. Now, something happened after this program aired on TV that's never happened before on Richplanet. It was picked up by mainstream media, and it was picked up in quite a serious fashion. So the Daily Express and the Metro newspaper, on their websites, they posted links to this interview, and because of that, it's got now approaching 500,000 views, this interview. And they wrote articles which were pretty serious about this issue. Now, I found that interesting because they've never done that with any of the other stuff on Richplanet. They must be aware of it. Why not? Why aren't they showing videos of Dr. Judy Wood? Why aren't they showing the Madeleine McCann stuff? Why aren't they showing Wilson Blackett? Why aren't they showing the 7/7 stuff? So there's research which is far more important, in my opinion, than this. And this is what they choose to put on a platform and get 500,000 views. So what is going on? I don't think it's just plucked at random. Somebody emailed me and said, I'm not quite sure I buy that McKinnon story, because I think the NSA, the National Security Agency, deliberately made those computer systems lax to let someone in so they could pick someone out and make an example of them. I'm not sure I believe that, but what I do believe is that they're using this story for an ulterior motive. We keep hearing about how ISIS are going to use email or the internet to take control of the national grid or power stations and cause mayhem using computer hacking, right? And I think possibly Gary McKinnon in the actual interview said for the first time there was this international story placing the dangers of computer hacking into the public consciousness.
We have to remember at that time, that was long before Anonymous and all that. That was the growth of hacking, big time, starting in the UK anyway. And it was the first time there was a sort of global awareness that this could be a problem. People like this could be a problem. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there may have been the idea that, well, if we get this one guy and do a great big show trial and make sure everyone knows about it.
And I think that's possibly what this is about. This is why this has been promoted, that the next fabricated terror events could be computer hacking related, and they need to plant these suggestions in people's minds prior to it happening. All right, now, as many of you know, I have a TV program, and I often have problems getting this kind of material onto television. Almost everything in part 1 I would not be able to put on the TV show. But I do try. So here, this is an email from the TV company saying that I just made an off-the-cuff comment that I'd made a film about Madeleine McCann. They said, no, we want you to take that out. Here's a comment from the TV company. Episode 6 has recorded phone call conversations. I think we've been down this road before. Can you provide evidence that they give you permission to record, please. So these were phone calls that I'd secretly recorded when I was talking to the police and the Farmers Union. And those phone calls were intended to expose incompetence, which in my opinion they did. Therefore, they're in the public interest because the police work for you and me, supposedly. But I wasn't allowed to put those phone calls in my TV program. So I said to them, well, look, the phone calls they're in the public interest. Channel 4 and BBC do this all the time, secretly record people and expose it on the TV program. So the TV company came back and said, well, Channel 4 and the BBC have a few more lawyers than we do, so it's up to them if they want to break the law. Not under our license, I'm afraid. So I had to edit out those phone calls. So this just shows you how difficult they're making it for me to get stuff on television. Here's a comment from episode 5. My colleague has just viewed your revised edit of episode 5, and I'm disappointed to discover you're still trying to push the boundaries and jeopardize us facing possible complaint. I'm unhappy with your comment against the BBC presenters of The One Show. Did you really need to make that remark to create people with heads full of shit? So, I just made an off-the-cuff comment talking about mainstream media and how it creates people with heads full of shit, and I put that picture up for a second. And that was a real no-no. Just think of the insults that fly around on programs like Have I Got News for You? I'm not allowed to do it. It's a satire. So they went on. This could be seen as a personal attack. We have a lot of traffic. So they're admitting that Richplanet is starting to get a lot of viewers. We have a lot of traffic, and I seriously don't have the time to keep going backwards and forwards with you on compliance issues, which slow down our operations. If you want to broadcast this kind of work, you need to do so under your own broadcast license. So the chief executive was copied in on that email, so he decided to watch it, and he pipes up, if the BBC or any of the presenters of The One Show was to start a fairness and privacy complaint, it would land us with the worst possible form of Ofcom investigation, even more so with the BBC potentially involved. We'd be faced with a massive diversion of resources in handling an investigation, which we just can't spare. On top of that, Ofcom have become very litigious of late and almost always picks on smaller channels where they can have easy wins, dumping their in-house lawyers onto the case. So he then went on to say, right, Richard, we're not going to take any more of your programs now unless you buy your own license, which is going to cost me $2.5 grand in the first year, followed by $1 grand a year on top of that. So they're making it more and more difficult. Hooray, it's Tim Peake. Have you bought your Union Jacks? Get them out. Come on. It's Tim Peake. He's on the International Space Station. Red Dragons? Come on. Wave those Union Jacks. Here's Tim Peake's message to the Queen. Here's Tim Peake launching the start of the Six Nations Rugby. If only we had as clear video images of that on Apollo 11 and the moon landings, we might know what the fuck happened. Yes, Tim Peake's on the International Space Station. Next week, Tim Peake is going to be reading the news, followed by Celebrity MasterChef with Tim Peake, and Dancing on Shite on the International Space Station with Tim Peake grinning like a Cheshire Cat. Do you think people who watching the start of the Six Nations want to see him? I don't think they do. So what's all this about? It's propaganda, in my opinion. It was on front page of every newspaper. Some people might call it PR, I call it propaganda. We can hazard a guess as to what that propaganda is for. It might be, as I would suggest, that the name of NASA has took quite a lot of, well, how should we put it? Many people are questioning NASA and whether they have told the truth about their various Apollo missions. The moon landings, yeah, never a straight answer. And I think that group has grown immensely over the last, say, 5 years. So I think this could be an attempt by NASA and other agencies to promote the whole issue of space travel, and in particular what NASA were doing with the Apollo missions in the 1960s and 70s. But let's just remind ourselves, right? The ISS where Tim Peake is is 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. The moon is 363,000 kilometers above the Earth. So if we enliken that the Earth is in Merthyr Tydfil and the moon is at London and take the same relative distances, Tim Peake has only travelled 327 yards. He hasn't even reached the A470, folks. Right? He's not really that far into space. Yeah? He's not. Going to the International Space Station is a completely different kettle of fish than getting to the moon and back, landing on the surface and coming back alive.
This programme is sponsored by Mouse Mesh. Mice can squeeze through gaps the thickness of a pencil. This simple, effective solution will not only prevent mice, it's also a barrier against wasps, bees and slugs. This programme is sponsored by Mouse Mesh, the humane way of keeping mice out of your home. Air brick covers come in 3 different colours and sizes, shaping the future of pest control.
Now, one of our guests was Carl James in the last series, and he spoke about the moon landings, and in particular, Stanley Kubrick. Now, Stanley Kubrick was a pioneering film director in the 1960s, 70s and 80s, and he worked with various cinematic techniques where you could film indoors but make it look like some massive landscape. And a lot of people think that he was used to provide the sets of alleged faked moon landings. Now, I do find that this subject is very good for starting fights with. If you want to start a fight in a pub, get everyone talking about the moon landings, especially if you've got each side there in the bar. So we did a whole program about the Stanley Kubrick, and the more you dig in it and the more you find out, the more plausible it gets, in my opinion. All right. Okay. Now, one of the people that Carl James spoke about is Bill Casing. I think Bill Casing is probably the first person to suggest that Stanley Kubrick might have been involved. Bill Casing was a technical author. He worked on various technologies that NASA used, so he had a good knowledge of the space industry, and he wrote a book called We Never Went to the Moon. We spoke about this book on the program. Now, after this program aired, I got an email from somebody with some new information, and I asked Carl James, I sent him the information, I said, did you know about this? He said, no, I didn't know that. Andrew Johnson didn't know either. So I'm going to give you this information, share it with you today, which was as a result of putting this out on the internet. It's an Italian researcher. Now, just before I go on to that, how many of you are familiar with this film, Capricorn 1? Yeah? Now, let me just fill you in on the plot first. This film is set in the near future, and it's about a manned mission to Mars. So in the film, we've got the rocket on the launch pad, and we've got the sort of vice president is there watching, getting it ready to take off. And just before the rocket takes off, someone pulls the astronauts out of the rocket, sticks them on a plane, and they get taken to a secret hangar. And then they're taken out of the plane, and in the hangar is this Mars set, right? So the guy in the suit there who works for NASA, he says, look guys, he says, if we put you in that rocket to Mars, you would not come back alive. Our technology is nowhere near ready enough. But we don't want to say that to the public. We don't want even to say that to Congress. Because if we admit that we cannot do this mission, it's going to affect all future space missions. We're going to get our funding pulled. So what we're going to do, we're going to fool everyone. We're going to fake this one mission to Mars, and then our funding will continue after that, right? So the NASA guy there in the suit says to the astronauts, I want you to put your spacesuits on and prance around this film set, and we're going to fake the mission. And the astronauts are standing there saying, no effing way, all right? So the NASA guy turns to them and says, right, well, if you don't, we're going to kill your families, right? That's the plot of a Hollywood film called Capricorn 1. So this is a film which is suggesting that an agency of the US government would threaten its own employees by getting their families murdered, okay? Now that is extremely unusual for Hollywood. Normally, films about space or films which feature military hardware are always pro-US. US always come out like whiter than white. So this is extremely unusual to say that an American agency would actually fake a mission to Mars. So what's going on here? And I think I've found the answer to this, because I was contacted by researcher Albino Gallipini, this Italian guy, and he is writing an autobiography of Bill Kaysing, the guy who first suggested that Kubrick faked the moon landings. This is what he wrote to me. He said that in 1977, that's the year before Capricorn 1 was made, Ruth and Bill Kaysing bought a caravan in Las Vegas for the sole purpose of being a mobile office for developing a screenplay inspired by the book We Never Went to the Moon. For this purpose, the Eden Press, which had published the first edition of the text, hired screenwriter Ken Rothkopf, entrusting him with the task. They all worked hard, assisted by Bill Butters, who felt certain of being able to be funded in the project by Sir Lou Grade, a famous Ukrainian-born, London-based film producer. So Bill Kaysing had got a screenplay ready, which was almost identical to Capricorn 1, but it was going to be about a faked mission to the moon, and it was going to tell the alleged true story, exposing the whole lie about the moon missions. That's what the film was going to be about. But in that precise period, producer Paul Lazarus with director Peter Hyams produced a movie whose plot traced in a stunning way their screenplay, with the only expedient difference that the simulation of space travel took place on Mars instead of the moon. Hyams' film was titled Capricorn 1. So Bill Kaysing found out about this, and he decided to sue the people who made Capricorn 1 because they'd stolen his script and made one key difference, that it was a fake mission to Mars. And by making that one key difference, they're fictionalizing the whole film, turning it from a factual film into a fictional film. So the writer filed a lawsuit against Universal Films and Peter Hyams unsuccessfully at a court in Beverly Hills for copyright infringement. According to the thesis proposed by his lawyer, the script was largely borrowed from the book on the lunar plot, and identified 16 elements in the film that violated copyright. A private investigator hired by the legal office in support of the suit made a shocking discovery. In Washington, someone in connection with the script had falsified the date of filing for copyright in the office in charge. The lawyer, impressed by the fact, gave the mandate, saying, "Bill, I have a wife and 2 boys. I do not want to clash with people so powerful as to be able to alter the filing date at a patent office." Right? So according to this, what they've done, they've nicked Bill Kaysing's script, they've changed part of it to say, right, it's a fake mission to Mars. They've filed the copyright of that script, and they've falsified the date so it predates Bill Kaysing's script, and then they've made the film. And that prevents him from ever making that film exposing the alleged truth about the moon landings. All right? Because if he did make his film, they could say, well, our film came out first, so you are breaching our copyright. All right? Now, if you watch the film with that in mind, it sheds a whole new light on this film, and it tells you why they would have such a negative plot in a Hollywood film about NASA. And there's a scene in the film where you've got all the operators there, that they're supposedly tracking the mission, and you've got the guy in charge, and one guy's looking at his screen, and he works out that it's not what they said it is, and he keeps coming to him saying, look, there's something wrong with these figures. The communication data is all wrong. It should take much longer. And he just sort of tells him to go away. And that guy then ends up getting murdered in the film. Okay? So I think that's very interesting. You've got to ask the question, assuming all that's true, you've got to ask the question, why would they go to such lengths to do this? Yeah? And it's little things like this that add up with regards this subject. Now, after I did the interview with Carl James, there was more information came out about Stanley Kubrick. Well, disinformation actually. I'm just going to go through it because again it's quite interesting. In December the 15th, 2015, there was a video came out online which was purporting to be Stanley Kubrick. So Stanley Kubrick died in 1999, and this video was supposed to be him about 3 or 4 days before he died. And in the video, he's saying, well, yes, I was involved in faking the moon landings. It was me. It was President Nixon's idea. I didn't really have much choice in it. I have been trying to tell the truth about it, blah, blah, blah. Right? And it looked very much like Stanley Kubrick. And a lot of people believed this video when it came out. And they said, yes, we finally got the proof. We've got Stanley Kubrick on video admitting that he was involved in hoaxing the fake moon landings. But not long after it reached the internet, someone else put a video out showing the whole film, proving that it was not Stanley Kubrick. Now, there's somebody called Jay Weidner, who's a moon hoax researcher, who has tried to explain what's actually happened here. He reckons there's a group within NASA who put out disinformation like this, because what this would have possibly been intended to do would be to sit around the internet for, say, 3 years, suck more and more people in, and then at some point in the future then discredit it, thus discrediting the conspiracy. But he reckons there's also another group behind closed doors of white hats, people who want the truth out, and they've released the full video online to actually discredit the first one. Now, there's another piece of, disinformation came out on the 15th of January this year, a film called Moonwalkers, and this film has its central plot where they have to go and find Stanley Kubrick because they need him to film the faked moon landings. But it's done in a very slapstick, comedic way. And if you were to get a young person to go and watch this film, and then when they come out of the film, tap them on the shoulder and say, well, actually, I think Stanley Kubrick did fake the moon landings, they'd probably laugh at you, because they know the truth because they've watched this film. Yeah? So it's disinformation aimed at the younger audience. This is disinformation aimed at your more hardcore conspiracy type person. But they're both pieces of disinformation about Stanley Kubrick and the moon landings. So what's going on here? Well, there's a guy, Bart Zabrell, who made these two films, which I recommend you all watch. Go and watch them if you haven't seen them. A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild. Bart Zabrell claims that Stanley Kubrick put an affidavit in his will when he died that was only to be opened so many years after his death. And we can only assume that that affidavit is him admitting, yes, he was involved in these moon landings. Because if you do believe that, many people claim that all of the clues in the film The Shining are him doing his level best to try and tell people, you know, something that he was told not that his life would be at risk if he did spill the beans, but he's trying to do it kind of surreptitiously in this film. So Bart Zabrell, as I said, reckons he's written an affidavit. Now we can hazard a guess as to how many years that affidavit has to run. Let's just say it was a 20-year affidavit. And he died in 1999, so by 2019, on the anniversary of Kubrick's death, there's going to be this piece of paper comes out, signed by him, possibly saying, yep, they made me fake these moon landings, all right? That would explain why this disinformation is coming out now, 3 years in advance. They're possibly quite worried about that affidavit. This is according to Bart Zabrell. And for me, the film on the right is my favourite, where Bart Zabrell, he approaches many of the Apollo astronauts, and some of the consequences are hilarious. He asks some of them to swear on the Bible that they walked on the moon or they orbited the moon. And for me, the Buzz Aldrin one is the most revealing. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. He says, he gets into Buzz Aldrin's office and he's sitting there doing an interview, and he says words to the effect, look, Buzz, I've got footage here. This is where they're faking the shot of the Earth in the window. He says, I've got footage here which proves that you didn't go where you said you did. And Buzz Aldrin's body language is all wrong if they did go. Right? He starts getting really defensive. He says, oh, well, we were just passengers on a flight. That's what he says. We were just passengers on a flight. You need to speak to NASA. So in other words, he's trying to pass the blame off onto someone else. Would you say that if you really did go to the moon? And then at the end of the interview, he starts threatening him that he's going to sue him and all of this. The one with Neil Armstrong is revealing as well. Neil Armstrong, in my opinion, his body language is all wrong if what he said he did was true. And the Apollo 11 press conference, Google that. It's an hour and 15 minutes long where the Apollo astronauts are sitting there and their body language is all over the place. But that's the evidence that I like to look at, body language. I know a lot of people look at photographs, and we've done at least 3 hours of this moon stuff on Richplanet. Okay, now if NASA are faking or have faked some of their Apollo missions, then what about their missions that they're carrying out now? Unmanned missions to Mars, which brings us on to the Mars Lemming, which I'll need to go back a few steps in order to explain. So over the last 30 years or so, NASA have been sending unmanned rovers to the surface of Mars. And according to NASA, there's still 2 which are functioning on the surface. The one on the right there is Curiosity rover, allegedly landed in 2012, and the one on the left, Opportunity rover, 10 years previous, and it's still going on 2 batteries, not much bigger than laptop batteries. Now, this is Devon Island, which is the largest unpopulated island in the world, where some of these rovers have been tested. It's in an extremely remote location, right up there in the Canadian Arctic. You'd be hard pushed to get there. You can't get a flight there. No one lives there. So the question is, why the hell have they chosen such a remote, inhospitable place to test these rovers? Me, as an engineer, it's the last place I would choose to do testing. But it just so happens that the landscapes look very like the photographs they send back from Mars. Now, I liaised with a guy called Douglas Gibson a little while ago, and he was sending me images taken from some of these Mars missions, where he's saying, well, that looks like it's taken from Earth. This one's a walrus arm bone. This shows a vertebrae. This is a piece of wood, blah, blah, blah. So I put them all in this document, along with some other evidence, like quotes from press conferences, from NASA engineers and that kind of thing, which I thought exposed the fact that they didn't know anything about these missions. So this document is a hypothesis entitled "The Opportunity and Curiosity Mars rovers are situated on Earth." Now, when I put this out, it was clearly quite a sensitive piece of work, because I was contacted by 2 independent scientists, and both of them went through every word of my document, trying to explain all of the anomalies that I pointed out as giving reasons as to why, no, these photographs have all been taken on Mars. Now, some of those explanations I have accepted, and I need to take them out of this document, right? But they have not managed to explain all of the anomalies, and they need to in order to debunk this hypothesis. So one of the tasks that I've got for myself in the few months approaching is to update this document and take out all of the stuff that they've managed to explain away, and the new hypothesis is going to be a very strong hypothesis, in my opinion. Now, one of the images which is going to remain in the hypothesis, I've just mentioned it there. I've labelled it the Mars lemming, but as you'll see in a minute, that might not be the right name. So this is an image that NASA put in their archive on the 4th of October 2012. So if we zoom in to it's there, those couple of rocks there, we zoom in there, this is what we see. So in the hypothesis, I've said, well, that looks like some sort of rodent, and native to Devon Island are Arctic lemmings, where they've tested the rovers. So I'm proposing this could be an Arctic lemming, and if it's an Arctic lemming, it can't possibly be on Mars, because the atmosphere is less than 1% of the Earth's, and no animal like that would be able to survive. So we're saying this is possibly an Earth photograph, not from Mars. So both of these scientists said, well, no, actually, it's a rock that you're looking at there that just looks like a rodent. So I'm going to read some of the comments from this scientist. He went through the whole document and made these comments in red. So I'm going to read his comments. This is how he dealt with the anomaly. He says, it's a rock or dead. Panoramic image PIA 16918, commonly known as the billion pixel view, shows the same position from the other side after Curiosity has entered rock nest. By comparing rocks in the original, the place where the rat is can be picked out, and there is a rat-shaped rock. Actually, it's 2 rocks with a small gap between them, without any of the shading that makes it look like a rat. PIA 16204 was taken on the 20th of September 2012. The section of PIA 16918 containing the back of the rat was taken on the 24th of October 2012. The rat, therefore, either sat in the same place for almost a month, is dead, or is a rock. Another possible explanation is that the rat sat in front of a rat-shaped rock, but he's getting sarcastic now, okay? Yeah. Which is fine, that's fine. We like sarcasm. So what he's saying is there's another photograph, billion pixel view of the same rocks taken a month apart from a totally different angle, and you can see it's just a rock, not a rat. So let's zoom into his image. So here's our anomaly in our original image. So he's saying that this rock here is that one, which you can tell by these ridges. And he's saying that one, which is kind of standing up off the ground, is this one. So you draw a line between the two, and he's saying this is the group of rocks in question. And his arrow there is pointing to what he says is the nose of the rock, and he's saying it's that rock and that rock, which from the other angle just look like a rat. Here's another image here. He's saying that there's the tip of the nose and there's the back of the rat. So now, in my last lecture, let's just identify the rocks as he has identified them, right? What he's saying is that that rock there is this one, and that this rock there is this one. So this object here is those two rocks seen from another angle. Now, in my last talk, I said, nah, I actually think that rock there could be that one, and that this object is in addition there. It's not, these two rocks are not making up that object. But I've since been contacted by another researcher, a Dutch guy, who spent a lot of time looking at these images, and he reckons that the scientist has misidentified these rocks, and I think he's probably correct, because he says that that rock there is actually this rock, and that rock there is that rock. So the object here should be in between there. Let me just show you some of his analysis. Right, so he spent a lot of time on this, and he's identified a whole load of the rocks. Now, if you've sat and had 4 pints tonight, you're going to struggle with this. Right, so I will be uploading it. You can download it and study it. But the important rocks are rocks 1, 2, 3. So you've got rock I. So you've got 1, 2, 3, and I. So you've got C, rock there. There's 2 rocks there, rock D, blah, blah. So let's zoom in. So what he now does, the 3 important rocks, rocks 1, 2, and 3, so we've got 1, 2, and 3, he starts examining the topology from 2 different angles. So he's looking at this part of the rock there, and he's saying, well, he thinks that it's that shape. So he's identifying this one as rock number 1. He then goes on to rock number 2, and he's saying, well, this has got a flat portion here, and he's saying that aligns up with this in rock 2. Rock 3, he points out various aspects of it. So he's circled in purple there, the back, and he's comparing it with that. He's saying that the back of this rock, marked in red, is that one there, which is behind the rodent's backside. He says that there's sand stacked up against this front rock, which you can't see from that angle. So he concludes that this object here is not in between those 2 rocks. So let's just zoom in on it. Let's put the color right, because NASA always, they take the real colors out of their images and they make them all red. There we go. So if you don't think that object, whatever it is there, this is smoking gun evidence that Curiosity rover is sending images from the Earth, not from Mars. And of course, if this image is from the Earth, that one has to be, doesn't it? Because it's the same rocks. Now, the Dutch guy, and I'm going to publish all of this at some point, he has started calculating the sizes of these rocks, because in one of the images there's tire tracks from Curiosity rover, and we know how big the tires are, or the tread marks, and he started identifying size, and he reckons that this is too big, it's too long to be an Arctic lemming. Now, one of the other places that the rovers were tested was the Arizona desert, and native to the Arizona desert are prairie dogs. So he actually thinks it's a young prairie dog in the image that we see there. So these are possibly coming from the Arizona desert, not the Canadian Arctic. Now, there's other images that they have not managed to explain away in my hypothesis. The other one is this one on the right. This is many experts agree that this is a fossilized crinoid of one of these that you find in many locations around the Earth. And I said in my last talk that what I think is going on is that there is a group who's in on the conspiracy, who they may be steering a rover around somewhere and allowing images to go back to NASA, but the majority of the team at NASA, I don't think, have a clue. So I think the team, they've allowed that image to be transmitted without knowing what it is. And then NASA have printed it out, they've stuck it on the desk of a geologist, and he's jumped up and down and said, we've got a crinoid on Mars, but they've never held a press conference on it or announced life on Mars. Because this is not a plant, it swims about the sea. And why haven't NASA announced this? Brian Cox says things like, we might find life on Mars. We might find microbes on Mars. Look, in NASA's own photographic record, they already have. but they've not announced it, and that's because I don't think it's been taken from Mars. All right then. And that's possibly a misnomer then. It's not a Mars lemming, it's an Earth prairie dog, possibly.
This programme is sponsored by Mousemesh. If you're in the construction industry, we've introduced Mousemesh, inbuilt with interchangeable fronts, 6 different colours and stainless steel. This programme is sponsored by Mousemesh. Our product has won several awards for innovation and concept. You don't need to kill mice and pests. You can stop them entering your home in the first place with Mousemesh.
Right, we come on to the subject of animal mutilation. So I'm going to show some images of mutilated animals, and I'm sure many of you know about this subject. If you're sensitive to seeing images of animals being mutilated and human beings, I'm going to show, please leave the room now, come back in about half an hour. If you're not familiar with this subject, that's because mainstream media, there's a blanket ban on reporting this subject accurately. I'm not aware of any article that's been in the mainstream in the UK that has accurately reported this phenomenon. There has been articles in Argentina. So what this phenomenon entails is that animals, including horses, cows, sheep, rabbits, are found with peculiar surgical incised holes on their bodies, and tissue and organs are removed from inside, and often exsanguination, so all the blood is gone. Common injuries are rectal core, so the rectum is cored out to a certain depth. The skin around the jaw is removed, and various other injuries such as removal of ear is common. But out of the thousands of cases in many different countries, as far as I'm aware, no one's ever been seen, caught or convicted with this phenomenon. Now then, I'm going to talk about a case that we made a programme about a particular horse in Syston. So this is in Leicestershire, and it occurred on the 8th of September last year. So as I said, we made a programme all about this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through quickly the information that we put out in that programme, and then I'm going to give you some information that I wasn't allowed to put on the TV show, which consists of some telephone calls. So this horse was found one morning, a perfectly healthy 2-year-old horse. The horse was semi-wild, so it was actually difficult to catch. Completely healthy, and it was found with these injuries on it. Now, I contacted the horse owner, Claire Watts, who owns up to 70 horses, and her horses are used in TV dramas like Poldark. She's worked with horses all her life. She's actually a spinal therapist of horses and other animals. So she told me that she's familiar with having postmortems done on her horses. She's had it done a few times before, and on every occasion she normally gets the postmortem report, which tells the owner what's happened to the animal, why it's died and all the injuries. She normally gets the report the same day, and she was fully expecting to get a copy of that report the same day when she found the horse mutilated. So David Caton and I told her, we said, look, you know, in these specific cases where you have these injuries, you might find that they don't give you the report. And I think she was a bit confused at that statement. She didn't understand it. I then directed her to a film that I made in 2010 about a case in East Sussex, which was very similar to her horse mutilation. And she was quite gobsmacked by it. She said, well, this is incredible. It's the same age, the same breed type, very similar injuries, 200 miles away 5 years ago. What's going on? So she was that impressed by the film, she showed it to her father and her partner as well. So she was quite open-minded on it, and she was happy to give myself and David Caton a copy of that detailed post-mortem, which would have given us a lot more information as soon as she was given it. All right, so here's some detailed images that she supplied. This is exactly where it was found in the field. There's a classic jaw strip, and eye removal is common. There's another angle of this incision, which David Caton reckons that there's actually 2 incisions within the incision from which tissue has been removed. So you can see there, these 2 holes, that they're further incisions within that incision. All right, now one of the things that she was told is that there was massive trauma to the neck. You can actually see it there in that image. So David Caton believes that there's been tissue removed from there through that hole. So I'm just going to show you a short video clip which describes the state of the animal. She then rang a very good friend who was a veterinary surgeon and sent her pictures which she took on her phone. The veterinary surgeon said it's her professional opinion that it had been done with a very sharp implement. She also said that she could not get her head around it, because she has looked and looked at the pictures, and the thing that is driving her mad is the lack of blood. She said the only explanation she could think of was if there was a strangulation of the gut, i.e. a bad colic. But if this was the case, Claire couldn't understand how there was still no blood when the horse was eventually moved. The injuries or procedures on the horse included a jaw strip, an extremely clean 5 to 6 inch diameter incision resulting in the removal of the ear, excision of the horse's chestnuts, which are small lumps on horses' legs. Hair had been cut and moved in tiny segments. The anus and vulva were badly swollen. There were small lacerations on the stomach, and the teats underneath where the milk bag would be almost looked like they'd been cut off. There were very tiny lacerations under the tail. The hair on the right side of the animal on which it was lying was laying the wrong way and ruffled, indicating the horse had been dragged. However, there were no drag marks on the ground anywhere near the horse, only drag marks some distance away in the middle of the field. There was no blood anywhere around the horse and nowhere in the field, which was searched vigorously by about 10 people. When the horse was eventually taken into the lorry, it was dragged 10 to 15 feet, but there was still no sign of any blood. Note, as in most mutilation cases, the items that were excised could not be found anywhere at the scene.
Right, let's just press this point about the condition of the ground where it was found. You can see there where it's lying. Now that grass was very, very damp and soft. These animals are very heavy. If that animal had been dragged into that position, there'd be quite deep grooves, drag marks, leading to where it was. There's no drag marks around the horse. But on this side of the horse, all of the fur was facing the wrong way, indicating that it had been dragged at some point, but not dragged into that position. So 200 yards away in the middle of the field, there was drag marks where it had clearly been dragged, and there was also impressions where you could see the horse's forelegs where it had been. So it had been dragged to a few different locations 200 yards away, but nothing from 200 yards to where it is, no marks around it at all. So that horse has been placed there where it was found. That's what the evidence is telling you. So it's not some bloke, a single bloke with a knife, nutter, slasher, etc., as they say in the media. There's something far more profound going on here.
Let's just revisit the comment that there was massive trauma to the neck. This could be very significant and lines up with mutilation injuries from previous cases. After I received the images, I passed them on to David Caton, who had a very close look at them. In his report, he gives his opinions and compares the injuries with the 2010 case, Rascal. I think it is possible that the 5-inch diameter hole about the right ear was cut primarily to facilitate extraction of a number of neck organs further down the neck. There are 2 closely spaced, deeper-looking cavities within this incision. Maybe the unknown organs have been withdrawn via these cavities. A bit like Rascal, but from a smaller, deep hole. This, I presume, could be the cause of the reported neck trauma, perhaps a convenient term for the organ's absence. Maybe this was seen, but not well by initial radiography, hence the claim that they wish to carry out CT scans. If true, it would suggest that they have not, as yet, surgically opened up the neck area in the vicinity of the open wound. I would have thought that a physical inspection would be cheaper than CT scans. Maybe they think it beneficial to examine non-destructively. A CT scan would perhaps prove to them that some advanced procedural method has been applied without the damaging open surgery of the PM. Like Rascal, the mouth, upper lip and muzzle wounds are similar, with the tongue still in place and intact. Maybe brain tissue has been taken via the mouth cavity or via the ear incision. Regarding the swelling of the anal and vulval orifices, I ponder whether it was necessary for them to have the bladder and lower intestines completely emptied for some reason. This might account for the discovery of patches of wet cowpat type excreta and some solid lumps of darker coloured feces in the local proximity. Removal of an eye, sometimes both, is another mystery. Virtually total loss of blood volume is a very common modus operandi feature. Some blood pooling is, like Rascal, evident. Some organs will retain a small amount of blood even though the majority has been exsanguinated. I am aware of teat or the tips of teats having been excised on cows in other cases, but this on a female horse is a first for me. Have seen bits of hair cut neatly and cleanly before, but again, why is the big question. Just like the Rascal case, other horses in the field or nearby were very spooked. I agree totally with Claire's assessment that Honey had been dragged along her left side.
Right, I'm just going to go through the obfuscation because what this illustrates is a cover-up or suppression of this information. The horse was found on the 7th of September. We know that it went for a post-mortem on the 8th of September because we spoke to the college. The post-mortem report was given to RSPCA inspector called Andy Bostock, and we do believe that that contained a CT scan in that report. On the 9th of September, the horse owner expected to get the report and asks for a copy, but they started fobbing her off. The vet spoke to the RSPCA and police, and the vet started to try to tell her that it was just predation, so it was just a fox that had done this. On the 10th of September, there was a media story, a headline in the mainstream media, saying that a guy had been arrested, 28-year-old man arrested in connection with this, but he was soon released without any involvement in it at all. But they got their headline, and I suspect that's why they arrested someone, just so they could generate that headline to put doubt into people's minds. So the owner wasn't even informed of that arrest. She read about someone being arrested for possibly doing this to her horse in the media. So she was livid and asked to speak to the chief constable. So she spoke to the RSPCA officer, who then told her that the horse had acute pancreatitis, which we believe is untrue. The RSPCA then told her that they can't give her the report until next week because they're waiting for a CT scan. We believe the CT scan had actually already been done on the 8th of September. Now, the reason why we know that is because David Caton and I telephoned the college. We found out the name of the pathologist who did the post-mortem, and we managed to speak to her in person. So this is David Caton just asking when the report was done and who it was given to. The female voice you hear here is the pathologist who carried out the post-mortem and the CT scans.
Has he forwarded a copy to Claire Watts, the horse owner?
I would assume he did, because this is usually how we work. So the vet provides us with the animal and we give the vet the report, and obviously the owner gets to see the report. Usually the vet is of course sharing the results with the owner, but in this case I suppose that Claire got all this already. So
the pathologist assumes that the owner had been given that report even though she hadn't been given it.
This is usually how we, so I don't know if either you would ask her directly. I would expect that she already got all the findings as well.
Yes. Well, the date of the post-mortem you sent out, when was that? What date?
This was on the 8th of September.
The same day?
Yeah, and this was Andy Bostock, the RSPCA.
Andy Bostock, yes. I remember Claire mentioning him, yeah. Did you carry out a CT scan? She thought you were doing a CT.
Yeah, this is it. This was done, so I can give you the direct number of Andy Bostock. This is probably the easiest then we see, because he already got the report, and I'm sure he probably shared it already with the owner as well.
He hadn't shared it with the owner, and I did try to ring him. The number didn't work. So I rang the RSPCA, asked for him by name. They said, oh, they can't give out numbers of RSPCA officers, so I've not spoken to him. So I got a phone call from Claire on the 19th of September. She told me that another horse had been found mutilated a few miles from where her horse was. So I asked her, have you had the post-mortem from Honey, the first horse? No, she still hadn't been given it. Anyway, David Caton and I filmed this second horse mutilation case. It didn't have as many of the same modus operandi features as the first one, so we're not really 100% sure about this second horse case. But she still had not been given a copy of the post-mortem report. And this time, the RSPCA guy was telling her that they were waiting for toxicity reports, which I believe is another lie. The second mutilated horse was sent for post-mortem as well, and a post-mortem report was generated and given to the same guy Andy Bostock, RSPCA. So I rang Claire a month later, because she still hadn't got back to me with this report, and asked her, have you been given a copy of the report? No. What excuse are they using this time? Well, this time they told her that they'd made another arrest, and that it was someone who knew her and had like a vendetta against her, and they had bailed this person until the 5th of November, and they couldn't give her a copy of the report until his bail was up. Now, David Caton and I were a bit suspicious of that claim, so we started asking her questions, and we felt that she might have been fed a yarn there with that particular second arrest. So I decided to ring Leicestershire Police and ask them about this supposed second arrest, because the first arrest, there was a media headline about it, and they put a press release on the police website, right? So they should have updated that same press release to say they had a second suspect. So I rang the police to ask them.
Leicestershire Police, Paul speaking, can I help?
Hello there, I'm just ringing in connection with a press release on the Leicestershire Police website.
Oh, right.
It was updated on the 10th of September 2015, and it's about a fatal horse attack in Syston.
Oh, yes, I know which one you mean.
Okay, it says in the press release, a 28-year-old man was arrested in connection with the incident and subsequently released with no further action. Now, I've been told that that's not true, that someone's been charged and bailed pending an investigation and has been bailed until some point in the future. So I've just wanted to ring and ask whether that statement on the website is true or not.
I would say that the 28-year-old man was arrested in connection with the incident, but was found not to have any connection with it. So
Right.
It was released, and we've asked then if anybody's got any further information to let us know.
I mean, has someone else been arrested, do you know?
I'm not aware of anything, just bear with me. On the 19th of September, a reward was offered
Yes.
for it, which is obviously after the other incident, the one that you've seen.
Yes.
So there's nothing to indicate any further that somebody's been arrested.
Right, so you don't think anyone else has been arrested after that first one then?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, thanks very much indeed now.
Okay.
Bye-bye now. So he's checking the police computer system there, so there had been no arrest. Right? Now let's just look at this list. Everything in red there, I believe, was obfuscation. They said it was predation, it wasn't predation. They said it had acute pancreatitis, it didn't have acute pancreatitis. They said they were waiting for a CT scan, they weren't waiting for a CT scan. They said they were waiting for toxicity reports, I don't believe so. They said there was another arrest. As you heard there was not another arrest, right? All of this to try and prevent her, Claire Watts, the horse owner, getting this full report on what happened to that horse. And to my knowledge, she's not received it to date. She certainly hasn't sent me a copy, and she said she promised that she would. Now this follows exactly what happened in the 2010 case. The owner of that horse, you can go online and watch the video from our website, it's called Silent Killers in Sussex, a full hour-long documentary. The guy to date, horse owner, still hasn't had a copy of the post-mortem. So I claim that this points to a cover-up in the UK on this issue. All right, now in the TV programme, David Caton and I discussed some possible explanations, and some people think that some group, whoever that is sampling the environment perhaps by taking these soft tissue organs and blood. My preferred explanation, we discussed on the TV programme, is something along these lines. In medical science, they often use animals as incubators to grow certain things for medicine. So in this particular example, and I'm not saying that this horse was used to make anti-lymphocyte globulin, I'm just giving this as an example. They take cells from a human, they inject them under a horse's skin. That horse then reacts to that injection and grows antibodies right throughout its blood. At some point in the future, after it's grown all of these goodies, those antibodies or the globulin is extracted, and then the antibodies are then injected into human beings to stop them rejecting organs that have had organ transplants. So that's what this stuff is used for, and it's grown in horses. Apparently, I've read that in the 1970s there was one horse that was being used for the entire world supply of anti-lymphocyte globulin. It might have been the 1990s. But this method of using animals as incubators is used for other things. Rabbits are used, I think sheep are used, chickens are used to create things in medical science. So they're using the animal as an incubator. And if you look at the modus operandi features, total exsanguination of blood we often see, and we often see soft tissue organs taken, and that's where the antibodies would reside. That's why I think this is something akin to this. It's not some lone nutter with a knife who can float an animal from one length of the side of the field to the other. It's something more profound or advanced. Now, we often hear about black helicopters in connection with animal mutilation cases, and this one was no different. So I'm just going to show you this clip.
Another interesting point in all this is that Claire witnessed and filmed black helicopters hovering over the fields 2 to 3 weeks before the mutilations happened.
For a couple of weeks before the incident happened, we noticed, there was a few people actually that noticed there was black helicopters flying above these fields in this area, and they were kind of hovering. It was generally around 1, 2 o'clock in an afternoon, and various people had obviously mentioned it.
The helicopters have never been seen since.
All right, now somebody sent me this book recently called Bloodless Cuts, which is one guy's research into US cases of animal mutilation between 1978 and 1992. There are dozens and dozens of cases in here. There's a whole section on black helicopters. And the conclusion is, there's no conclusion. No one really knows who these black helicopters belong to. Some people claim they're not black helicopters, all right, which sounds a bit odd. So we can guess as to what's going on here. Some people would say, oh, well, it's the black helicopters that's done it. They were there 2 weeks prior, and they've come along 2 weeks later. They've lifted the horse up into the helicopters. They've done the surgical procedures, and then they've put the horse. I am open to that suggestion. Some people think that the black helicopters are sent out or vectored towards a craft that's been seen on radar, and the craft that's been seen on radar is what's doing the mutilation. Now, it's interesting that the black helicopters were witnessed 2 weeks before, because if you think about what I've said about injecting an animal with something and then harvesting it a number of weeks later after the antibodies have had time to multiply, right? That would line up with perhaps the black helicopters or whatever craft the black helicopters were chasing was injecting the horse at that time. And then a few weeks later, it's then mutilated, perhaps. I'm hypothesizing. But as I said before, no one's ever been seen, caught or convicted where we get this type of modus operandi of small holes, that I'm aware of at least. All right, now I'm going to run through some uninvestigated cases, because I've just investigated in detail this one case, and there's been several others over the last year reported in our media. Now, for every case in the media, I suspect there are others which are not appearing in the media. So this is a news article from January this year, 15th of January. Horrific attack in Sunderland sees 5-year-old horse's neck slashed. And we often see this in the mainstream media, words like neck slashed, when you then go and investigate the cases and you find the neck hasn't been slashed, it's been surgically incised with a circular hole. Here's a good example of that. This is from January the 4th this year. Horse found mutilated, could be work of cult. I'm not aware of any direct evidence that any cult is involved in any of this. And again, mutilated, perhaps surgically incised should be the word, because I managed to find a post from the owner of this horse on Facebook, and this is what the owner said. There are some sick fuckers out there. They cut his sheath balls and even cut his bum away, so it had a rectal core, a modus operandi feature. They took his eyes out, another modus operandi feature. Left him in the field completely drained of blood, so it's been exsanguinated, modus operandi feature. Okay. This is from November the 19th, 2015, so I'm going backwards in time. 6 horses have their throats cut in savage attack near Pontedarway, not far from here. So I have been meaning to go to Pontedarway to try and speak to the people who own these horses to see if they've taken any photographs. Going back in time, October 2015, police have said the horse found dead in 4 marks died of natural causes after horse ripper fears. Again, they've not caught a horse ripper. Then we go the 8th of September, the case I've just discussed. Again, we see the same language. horse killed in barbaric blade attack. It's not a barbaric blade attack, it's something far more precise. Here we go, 20th of August 2015, horse dies after sexual assault near Newport Sligo. And it goes on, the 3rd of April 2015, sadistic slasher who knifed a horse and left it bleeding to death is hunted by cops. None of these people, anyone I'm aware of, has ever been seen, caught or convicted. And for every story that I've managed to find in the media, God knows how many there are not being reported. Now here's an article from the New York Times, of all places, from 1993. It says something is wrong in Hampshire, that's England. Over the last 3 years, more than 30 horses have been savagely attacked. The attacks, which actually date back more than 10 years, but are now occurring more often and turning fatal, have happened in open fields and inside stables, in broad daylight and on moonlit nights. In at least half the cases, the horse's genitalia have been slashed or mutilated. Again, slashed or mutilated, surgically incised is probably more accurate. Here's an article from 1992 from The Independent. Full moon attacks on horses and ponies baffle owners. A series of horrifying assaults over the last 15 years has reached a new peak, shocking horse lovers in Hampshire. So that's saying 15 years, so in other words, it's going back to the 1970s. In all of these mainstream stories, they're not really telling you the real modus operandi, right? They're just indicating there might be some nutter. Here is something that somebody sent me from the medieval Welsh folk tales, the Mabinogi. It says, this is from the 11th century, with that he started striking up at the horses. He sliced their lips back to their teeth, and their ears back to their heads, and their tails to their backs, and wherever he could get a grip on their eyelids, he would cut these back to the bone. And the horses were mutilated thus, to the extent that no further use could be got from the horses. The article or this text doesn't say who he is. I suspect they didn't know. Right, so what's going on with these horse mutilation cases? Is it a big psyop, or is it a genuine cover-up? Somebody contacted me after I put the Claire Watts documentary out and said, "Oh, Richard, that Claire Watts is probably a government agent. You've just been fooled by that. They've done that horse deliberately, and they knew you would make a documentary about it, so because they want you to put out information to get people to fear ETs." Oh well, possible, I suppose. But does that mean that all those other cases that I just showed you in the media there, those horse owners were all government agents, just in case Richard D. Hall happens to go and interview them? I doubt it, because I wasn't given the story of Claire Watts. I had to pursue and find her contact details, all right? It wasn't handed on a plate to me. So I do feel there is a big cover-up on this. And as I said, you never get a proper, accurate assessment or information on this in our mainstream media. I'm going to show you an example of the kind of thing that we have had in our mainstream media. This is a recent recording of a Radio 4 program which features Brian Cox, called The Infinite Monkey Cage, where they talk about science issues in a kind of jocular fashion. And there's all kinds of psychological manipulation, in my opinion, goes on in this program. But just have a listen to this.
Why, though, is creationism and denial of evolution, that conspiracy theory, that all these people, you guys, are conspiring to advance Darwinism for your own benefit, why is that so prevalent? And I actually think it relates to the phenomenon of alien cattle mutilation. I don't know if you guys even remember this, but back in the day, in the 80s, 70s, alien cattle mutilation was a thing. People were like, what happened to these cows? And who mutilated them? Was it aliens? Was it the government? There was even a bad movie made about it at one point. And a journalist named, I think it was Paul Hitt, for Harper's, went and investigated the phenomenon. And he did two things. First of all, he went out with some farmers, and they actually talked to some biologists, and they observed a dead cow that had died, of whatever cows die of. And they watched as it naturally decomposed, and there were some parasites and some insects that created basically geometrical holes in its carcass that looked like somebody had done it on purpose. Okay, so they discovered what caused this phenomenon. Then she found, or rather he found, that there was one woman who basically sold books, lectures, tapes about alien cattle mutilation to a credulous audience and made about $60,000 a year. And he said that $60,000 a year explains alien cattle mutilation.
There you go. He's talking about Linda Moulton Howe there. Notice he didn't name her. Now, we mentioned a film there. If you watch Linda Moulton Howe's films, they're excellent. In one of them, she interviews a pathologist who's got a mutilated cow, and he's trying to explain to the viewer that it's impossible for all of the blood of a cow to be taken without some sort of external means, because the cardiovascular system collapses before all of the blood is pumped out, and you always have blood left in the body. Her work is excellent, and he's trying to slag it off there. Oh, and by the way, he's saying because she happened to make some money out of it, she turned it into a living for herself. Therefore, that means she must be lying about it. Yeah. So just forget everything that you've heard from me this evening, right? Because you paid 12 quid to get in here. I can't possibly be telling you the truth, can I? Because you paid money. What an arsehole. Where do they get them from? Okay. Now, one thing that I possibly disagree with Linda Moulton Howe on is whether this phenomenon has occurred to human beings. A highly controversial issue, I'm sure you'll agree, because the first question people do ask when you find out about this evidence is, ooh, I wonder if that's happened to people. And perhaps that's the reason why this post-mortem report and the whole thing is suppressed. Now, I made a film all about this a couple of years ago called UFOs and NATO, the Human Mutilation Cover-Up, and I managed to speak to a guy who claimed he was in a Black Ops unit, and that Black Ops unit's job was allegedly to fly out in a helicopter after they'd received intelligence following UFO reports and cases of human mutilation. And he claims that in his tour of duty in this NATO-run team, he witnessed between 35 and 40 mutilated human beings, normally young adults. And the picture that you see there is a reconstruction of a case which allegedly happened on the Brecon Beacons. A young man and a young woman aged between the ages of 16 and 21. All right. Now, I do believe that there are photographs that certain people have seen with regards to this case. And this film follows my quest to try and get hold of those photographs. But I'm certain that those photographs do exist. Okay. Now then. This is, now, yeah, I'm going to show some images of mutilated human beings. Sorry about that. So if you want to leave the room and not see them, please leave the room now or look away. Okay. One case that we do have images from of a human mutilation case is from 1988 in Guaraparanga in Brazil. Now, these have been all around the internet. They're very well known in UFO lore. And some people have tried to say, well, it's Agent Orange. Some people say the guy was just tortured or the bullet wounds or what have you. But I refer to the post-mortem report where it says, absence of organs in the pelvis and abdominal cavity due to the removal of all viscera with signs of tearing and vital reaction. So it's saying that these holes have been used to extract tissue and organs from within the guy's body. And the same was true of the head. Organs in that area were extracted. And also tissue was taken through the holes in his armpit there. Okay. Now, I was sent images recently of a possible case of human mutilation not far from that case in 2009, a place called Imbituba in Brazil. Now, I'm going to show you some images of a girl, a 17-year-old girl. So if you don't want to see it, please, they're graphic, leave the room. But the reason why I'm showing you these is because, to me, it looks similar to the modus operandi found on animal mutilation cases. And I'm not making a judgment as to who or what is causing this. I'm saying that, I'm asking the question, do these injuries look like the same modus operandi as animal mutilation cases? So this occurred on the 23rd of June 2009. A body was found in Imbituba in the state of Santa Catarina on wasteland on the banks of the BR-101. It's in the southeast corner of Brazil. So there it is. And the Guaraparanga case, not that far away in the southeast corner of Brazil. Okay, this is an aerial shot of Imbituba near where the body was found. This is her, 17-year-old Lysandra Hartz Benedict. This is her family here, holding up a photograph of her. And just one thing to point out, the Black Ops guy told me that it's always young adults that he said was found mutilated, and that it does seem to line up with animal mutilation cases. It's healthy young adults that are generally the victims. Now, they did arrest this guy 37-year-old male, and they put him on trial, but there was no evidence against him. I think he'd been romantically involved with her in some way, or there was some connection with him to this girl, and it was the only person that could think of that might have been involved, but there was a lack of evidence to convict him. I don't think there was any evidence that he'd been there. So it's a completely unsolved murder, that's what I'm trying to say. All right, so I'm going to show you these images. This is the body was, this is the body covered. All right. So see, it appears that there's a jaw strip, which is what we find in animal mutilation, and eye removal, animal mutilation, tissue removed from inside the head, and look at the smoothness of this incision here. We've got the ear missing again. We've got an incision in the armpit area there, which possibly could have been used to take tissue from the inside. And if we go to this next view, well, I'm just comparing the incision in the arm there with the Guaraparanga case and there. Now in this image, we see another modus operandi feature. Where's the blood? There's no blood on the ground anywhere, which is as if the body's been placed there. And if we look down at the pelvis here, just zoom in there, we see a small hole, which looks very similar to the holes we find in animal mutilation cases. So are there organs missing from within inside there? We don't know, because I've not seen a post-mortem report. All right. Sorry to finish on such a gory note, but you know, it is the unbroadcastable truth, and I don't think I'll be able to get any of that on TV. Now, there are a number of people in the United States who are lobbying the US government to try and get them to tell the truth about UFOs. And they say, well, we don't mind the animal mutilation stuff. We're quite happy to ask for the truth about that. But we have to deny that this has ever happened to human beings. Otherwise, the US government aren't going to open their UFO files if we start talking about this. Yeah. So, but if it's true, it's true. We have a right to know. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, and there are still some leads in that Brecon Beacon case that I'm following, and I suspect that information in Brazil is easier to get hold of, because I think their media is a little bit different, and in Argentina. So David Caton and I have been looking at a number of alleged human cases over the years, and we're just compiling a bit of a database on it. Very gory subject to finish on, but as I say, it was the unbroadcastable truth. I'm Richard D. Hall. Remember, believe none of what you hear, including from me. Do your own research. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night. Thank you.
This programme was sponsored by MouseMesh. Problem: mouse in your home. Reaction: solution: MouseMesh. Air brick covers can also be glued into place with our air brick adhesive.
From any of those things, they would have been free from UK Parliament, which I believe has no power at all. It's not the power in the UK, so I don't think they were voting for independence. True independence would mean just that. So I'm looking forward to tonight. We always get a good reception from people from Glasgow. The Iron Horse, a couple of years been there, and other venues as well in Glasgow. We'll always get a good crowd. Mark's a bit of a musician, singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar player, written many songs. We'll get him to perform one perhaps at the end of the tour. Can you perform us a song at the end of the tour, Mark?
I think I could do pull something out the hat. Why not?
Pull something out of the hat? You'd give us a few options?
Possibly. I could use the guitar, mind, but you know.
We will need to find somewhere with a guitar. Right, I'm coming into Shockley Bridge, which is where I used to live. I'm going to pick Mark up, who lives in Blackhill Concert. And viewers may remember that the poet in the pub, Phil Atherton, also lives in Blackhill Concert.
Oh, welcome to Richard's Roadie's house.
Did you have a good sleep?
Not too bad. Had to unwind for an hour.
Did you?
And then, well, I went to bed at 5. I mean, we got back, what, just after 3.
Yeah, so we drove back from Glasgow last night. What, 3-hour drive, and we didn't get in until 3 a.m. So
pretty quick drive because it was so quiet on the motorway. But I think I fell asleep, drifted off at 5, and then I woke up at
yeah, and
well, I think 11 o'clock, so I had about 5 hours. So
right,
on with the show.
Oh, you've been up since 11. I slept until 12:30, like so. Yeah.
I think this is what time I'm used to getting up to be honest.
So we're heading for the Toon. Do you follow football at all?
Yeah. If I supported a team, I would support Newcastle.
Do you support the Toon Army?
I do, I suppose. Yeah.
Give us a chant. Give us a chant.
I do know one actually.
You were just singing it.
I'm coming home, Newcastle. Never should have been away. I'm coming home. Rest in peace to the man who wrote that, good guy.
Ronnie Lambert.
That's the one. I should have sung it. Ain't no doubt it's plain to see.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Neal. We were singing that yesterday, weren't we?
That was our
what?
Kind of alarm clock.
She's lying.
She's lying. If Meatloaf and Jimmy Neal were to do a duet, it would sound like this. And I would do anything for love. He's lying.
This is a...
This programme is sponsored by Mousemesh. Mice get into your home via the air bricks. Mousemesh is a humane alternative to preventing mice and other unwanted guests from entering your home.
Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. On today's show, I will be screening part 2 of the Richplanet 2016 speaking tour. But before that, some observations on the brainless media. Last week, yet another mass shooting incident was reported in the United States. Incredibly, before you could say Barack Obama's a puppet, the BBC had located the crime scene, travelled to the crime scene, found the identity of the alleged gunman, obtained a passport-style photograph of the alleged gunman, found how many people he had killed, found out what weapons he had used, found out who hid in the toilets, found text messages sent by the victims, and, most importantly, found out why he had done it, before any police investigation had been completed. In fact, I don't know why the United States government bothers to have a police force when it can just call the superheroes at the BBC who seemingly solve any crime free of charge in seconds. They don't even need to have a trial. Sorry, I got that wrong. There won't be a trial because the perpetrator was allegedly killed, as usual. So we get an inquest, which, if in the UK, means no jury, as in the Jed Allen case. If this event was a genuinely unexpected random attack, do you really think the BBC would be able to do all that? It's reminiscent of so many other contrived events we've seen over recent years, and I don't think I need to tell the viewers of Richplanet what the probable motives are for these kind of events. Now then, have you registered to vote in the referendum yet? Are you going to vote in or out? I laughed out loud whilst listening to Radio 4 the other day, who were reporting on the latest psychological operation intended to try and get more people to vote. They said that the computer system had crashed because too many people were registering to vote at the same time. I spat my coffee out over the computer screen. If you believe that, you believe anything. But don't worry, they said. The government have decided to extend the deadline by 1 day. Phew, I bet that story added a few % onto the turnout figures, which of course is what they need in order to justify the hapless EU and UK parliaments. Now, most people's birthday usually lasts around 1 day. The clue is in the name, birthday. but not the Queen of England. If you watch mainstream media, the Queen seems to have been having a birthday for about the last 6 months now. Not only that, she apparently has 2 separate birthdays, which by my reckoning makes her 180. How much more can the mainstream media possibly milk out of the Queen's birthday? If you don't think it's all propaganda, then please look up the word propaganda in a dictionary. On with the show and part 2 of the Richplanet 2016 speaking tour. And first, a roundup of all the venues that we attended. Right, this is the start of the Richplanet 2016 tour. And I'm in Newcastle. I've driven up from South Wales and we're on the way to Edinburgh, which is the first venue. And this is Mark, my roadie. All right, Mark?
I'm Mark, Richard's roadie. Hit a bit lucky having such nice weather on the very start of the tour, so hopefully that keeps up.
So we're just travelling over the River Tyne now. We should be in Edinburgh in a couple of hours. Then Glasgow. I always find the Edinburgh audience is a bit more subdued than the Glasgow audience. A bit more studious and quiet perhaps. The Glasgow lot occasionally shout things out in the audience, which is good. So the first venue is the Waterside Social Club in Edinburgh. We're staying in a nice little place in Glasgow. After that, back to Newcastle, the hometown, which is, they say your hometown is always the hardest crowd. And then down to Hull, Manchester, in Liverpool, Derby, Birmingham, London, Aylesbury, Weston-super-Mare, and Merthyr Tydfil. And it is very bonny today. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. We're going to go to the Glasgow venue now, but we've got a few hours to kill. What did you think of it last night, Mark?
Oh, really good gig. Very good start to the show, to the tour. I think we're going to get a bit more of a feisty crowd tonight with the Glasgow.
One of the big issues to do with Scotland over recent years was the vote for independence. A lot of people think that vote was rigged. That's possible. I don't actually think it was a vote for independence, because if you're voting for independence of the UK, then you have to vote for independence of the monarchy, of the intelligence services, of the military, of the Bank of England, and all these other institutions, which, even if Scotland had been given independence, they wouldn't have been free. Yeah, there was a few people shouting out stuff at the back, but apart from that, it went really well. And I'm on my way to Aylesbury. It's 5 to 1 in the morning, and the sat-nav's brought me through London. Get to see the sights of London. I like to do the drive sometimes after the talk, and then I know that I'm at the venue first thing in the morning. They've all gone pretty well. Nick Colostrom was there tonight, and he said a few words about his new book. Aylesbury is sold out, a smaller venue than normal, only 100, but sold out nonetheless. Alison, Jennifer, Alison, Philip, song, it's just a list of women's names. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. Okay, I'm in Aylesbury now. I'm at the Railway Club in Aylesbury. Hence, I'm standing near the railway line. Right, I'm at Aylesbury, and we've just finished. Everyone's gone home apart from a few stragglers. Andrew Johnson is one of us.
Very straggly here.
We've got who have we got?
Neil.
Neil
Geddes-Ward. Hello.
Oh. Mena.
Christina.
Matthew.
Douglas.
Yes, Douglas.
You've all helped me pack up, for which I'm very, very, very grateful.
And here we are at the Railway Club.
I'm on my way to Weston-super-Mare. Made of cheese. I'm in Somerset, and last night I stayed at the Webbington Hotel. See it in the background there. I'm just arriving in Weston-super-Mare. There it is. the Grand Atlantic. I love this place. There's the new pier, which replaced the one that burnt down. The Greek mafia run this place apparently, so I'm told. Looks a bit continental, doesn't it? Western-Supermare. Mediterranean town plonked on the Bristol Channel. It's great. I'm in Weston, and there's a guy called Steve who lives here, who has been great help over the years with gigs at Weston, and he lives in this flat. I've just seen him go in actually. Right, Steve. All right, he's coming. Here he is. I've got him on camera.
Oh.
All right.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good.
Come on in.
All right, now, just while I've got you on camera, one of Steve's claims to Big River is it?
So what do you think about the pedestrianisation of
We're on the Scotswood Road, which is a famous road in Newcastle. The Bladen races, except that you would be going in the other direction if you were going along the Scotswood Road to see the Bladen races. Just arriving at the next venue number 3, Newcastle, Tyneside Irish Centre. Right, we've nearly set up at Newcastle. Got our Richplanet pop-ups in place. Check this sound. Mark is over here setting up the stall, which features Where Did the Towers Go by Dr. Judy Wood DVDs, including the new Madeline McCann film When Madeline Died ? This is where I'll be standing. My laptop. We've got about an audience of 130 coming today.
This video is at Building 7. Notice it's one piece and one piece only that has this lather pouring out of it.
And I've also got the name and address of the woman who found. I'm on my way down to Hull. I'm still in County Durham. It snowed last night, as it does in Concert. See, it's a glorious sunny day. We're going to have a slow drive down to Hull. Right, we're halfway to Hull, and it was fantastic weather when we left, but it's snowing now. Right, we've just arrived at Hull, and we're at the Inglemeyer. We're in Liverpool now. This is the Adelphi Hotel Grand venue. The van's open, Mark. It's just up there if you want to start unloading. That's the nearest I could get it to the door.
You know, got over there.
Okay, so this is where we are tonight. I'm on my own now. Mark left me in Derby. He's gone back to Newcastle, so I've got to set up myself. Hot Shots Snooker Club. I think it holds about 200. We should have about 150 coming tonight, I think. Stayed at Andrew Johnson's for a few nights, so I didn't have a talk last night, so I still feel knackered. I'm at the Swanley Richplanet talk with Dr. Nick Colestrom. A few other things just made me a bit wary of this particular event. This is probably going to be the largest one. Over 150 people coming to this one, so I've actually ordered a security guard.